Juno 2024 trip was actually the second in a series that started in 2019. The trip was an opportunity for students across our entire district retracing the steps of the soldiers who landed in Normandy on D-Day. And what was really exceptional for these students was the fact that many of them had direct connections back to their grandfathers, grandmothers, some relative that connected them to the actual soldiers and men and women who landed and were involved in the D-Day landings.
My father's Dutch and my mother's Canadian, and so that mix of the people who liberated us and then the people who were liberated is very, very important to me, and seeing it firsthand was extremely impactful. My great-grandfather served in World War II, and he died right before I was born. That is someone that I could have met in my lifetime who fought in the Netherlands, and it really makes that personal connection.
In Carpiquet, that is where my grandfather had lost his leg during battle. On the day that we went to Carpiquet, we had went to a couple ceremonies. We were hosted for lunch, and I was told that just down the road there was a field, and that's exactly where my grandfather had lost his leg. So I was like in shock because I was so close to the point of like where his life had completely changed, and he had lost one of the most important things, like one of his body parts. And knowing the backstory as to what had happened to him that day and knowing how he felt through whether it be his diaries or my dad's stories, that was a pretty surreal experience.
To basically join the district as one, kind of come together as one entity because of the fact that, again, right from Campbellton to Rexton, the same geographic area in New Brunswick represented the North Shore New Brunswick Regiment. And so soldiers who came from those areas and those communities are where our students come from as well.
It was really surreal to travel that far, to wait 13 hours in an airport, to travel 12 hours in a plane, and then arrive and go to a cemetery and see names of people that you know, see names of people who are related to your friends. And it's difficult to understand, it's difficult to comprehend at first that these people were like us, these people were the same as us, they were as old as us. It's just so impactful. It's very hard to even put it into words.
Our First Nations students and our First Nations director was also involved in many of these ceremonies.
We received an invitation from the municipality of St. Aubin-sur-Mer to do an evening ceremony to honor Indigenous veterans.
It was extremely significant. I actually spoke during that ceremony. I feel very proud and grateful that I was able to talk in front of all these people and try to send out a message. I feel really grateful.
The students did a wonderful job. They showed great leadership, and they honored and represented their communities very well. They knew the level of responsibility that they had, and they also understood this once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience, and they really leaned into it and worked hard on not only executing the ceremony, but also planning it.
We couldn't have managed this kind of the size of an event without a strong leadership team. So yeah, we all worked very closely together. Things, for example, like communication, because not only did we have our if I can call it a senior team, we had all our chaperones who had to be in close communication with us and know what the next step was, and keeping everybody in the know and making sure people were moving ahead was really, really important.
The thing I remember, even if it's a year ago, is the walk to Tailleville. I just remember being near the front of the crowd, and then it was like, I just looked back and there was thousands of people. We're all basically just walking in silence to another village, and it was just so cool to walk with my friends. And I think that's just the most memorable thing.
It made me think, what if it was me? What if 100 years ago I was born and I was sent across the seas and I died in those trenches?
It felt surreal because I was there on a trip where I could enjoy the experience, and I was happy to be there. But I realized that he was there to fight for his country, and like, he was there for battle. He wasn't there for himself, he was there for others. So knowing that in that moment, that is where his life changed, it was really surreal to be there.
You can almost like feel
I guess, like the presence of history and like the presence of all the people that were there. And it was really like something that stood out to me.
We need to keep going back because we need to know so it doesn't happen again. So those situations don't continue. So we don't have a mass genocide. We don't have another big war. We don't want those things to happen. That's why we continue to tell those stories. Because something that is very commonly known is history always does repeat itself through some way, shape, or form. That's why we talk about history. That's why we spread this awareness so we can make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Everyone from the trip, when we were there, I was near the end of it, were just bawling. Like, it was so emotional, and I've learned about, World War II and World War I in school and in Remembrance Day, but nothing really can compare to being in those places where it happened and seeing that the effects of it are still here. I remember being in that graveyard, and there's all of these graves, and just crying for all these people and what they had to endure. And it was kind of a beautiful moment because we were all crying, but we were all supporting each other, the teachers, the students. It made it real. Like, it wasn't a story, like this actually happened.
You can learn from a textbook, but nothing really shows you what they went through, and that emotional experience tied to what they've really done for us. They were kids like us when they went there, and it'll stick with me forever. That's something I'll never forget.